We're good. Hey guys, welcome into our last college football prize pick show of the year. We got the national championship game to talk about, Georgia versus Alabama. And if you're new to prize picks and don't know what it is, it's a daily prop contest that you can pick amongst all sports. You can pick anywhere from 2 to 5 players, pick some over-unders. If you do 5 and get all 5 correct, you'll 10x on your money. And if you're new, use code Awesemo. You'll get $100 matched on your first deposit and get an access to a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum that is redeemable through your email. And also, this is the perfect time to join because we got a fantastic prop for the national championship game. PrizePicks is giving you Bryce Young over 0.5 passing yards. He's going to hit that prop as long as he plays, and it's an easy way to get used to the app, and you can pick between basketball and a few other things as well. But anyways, let's get into the show. Joined with me, as always, Matt_Gajewski, who provides fantastic projections for the college football slate. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. It's the end of the road for the season, so a little bit bittersweet, but I'm really excited for the game we have in front of us.
Oh, yeah. No, this is going to be a good one. I mean, Bama, Georgia, 52.5 point over under. Georgia's favored by 2.5 right now. That line stayed around there the whole time. This is going to be a great game. Obviously, I'm an Alabama fan, but you can attest that Nick Saban underdog taking the points are always something that you should be doing.
I mean, I am on the Bama side here, especially after the first game we saw there. So I was kind of surprised to see this Alabama team come in as an underdog. I think the line is a little stale now. I grabbed this at +3. I wouldn't take anything below that, but either way, if this plays to the spread, very close game, should be exciting.
Oh yeah, but let's get into it. Let's get into some of our picks to make people some money. Starting with yours, we're going to start with Bryce Young, who's going to be the talk of this show to begin. You got him under 2.5 passing touchdowns. Tell me why you like it and where you got to that number.
Yes, the 2.5 passing touchdowns. Their implied team total is just 24.75. So obviously, when you look at an implied total, how you break that down, some of it's broken down into field goals, some of it's broken down into defensive scores, defensive points, if those occur. So right now, it's already priced pretty close to 2.5 touchdowns. And then if you look at books across the industry, retail books, you're going to find this juiced heavily towards the under. Obviously, with the parlay format on PrizePicks, they can't juice this towards the under. It's literally just a 50-50 split either way, whether he hits it, whether he doesn't. So this is going to be like around the industry, you'll find -170 towards the under on this. So it's just not priced efficiently because of the way PrizePicks structures it. Anytime we can get an edge like that, it's going to be something I'm looking to exploit.
Oh, I agree to that. I mean, Bryce Young, even as great of a game he had that first national championship game, that was with Brian Robinson limited. He threw for 3 touchdowns. That was probably the best game I've seen him play all year against one of the top tier defenses. So again, I do like that under 2.5 passing touchdowns. I also think that Alabama will use Brian Robinson a little bit more towards that goal line being healthier and just the way he ran against Cincinnati. But for me, obviously, you're going to take that over 0.5 passing yards. But if you miss out on that opportunity, you're here watching this video over again at 7:45, trying to get in your last second picks. I also like the under of 300, or I like the under of 311 passing yards for Bryce Young. This game is going to be much different. I think Georgia's going to try to use that same style of coverage that Cincinnati played and try to limit them from throwing down the field. It's something that you can go ahead and, like last time they played, Jameson Williams was catching everything downfield. Man had 184 yards and 2 touchdowns. Phenomenal game. I don't think they're going to allow him to throw that down the field. Mechie was also a part of it. I think they're going to make these freshmen and Slade Boldman try to beat them on the other side of things. And if they fail to do so, I just think Bryce Young won't be able to hit this over on the passing yards. I know your projections have him right around it based off of what he's done all year. But for me, I think this is just, there's a little bit different of a matchup this time around.
I agree with that to a degree. I don't think that Georgia is going to be able to limit them. It's just the fact that, if they do try to dedicate that coverage to Jameson Williams, there's 4- and 5-star receivers at every single position. Alabama can put you in 2 tight end sets, 12 personnel with Billingsley and Latu. They can use Brian Robinson as a receiver out of the backfield, something he's very good at. So there's so many ways to beat Georgia where if they're going to dedicate 2 players to cover Jameson Williams, someone's going to be left one-on-one or in a mismatch. And I think that's something they can definitely exploit.
Yeah, no, I agree, which is why for me, the Jahleel Billingsley over 15.5 receiving yard mark is where I want to lean, just because I think Alabama will be also obviously running a little bit more. They're going to need other players to step up. And Jahleel Billingsley has had that opportunity to do so in his time at Alabama. If you've never watched us play football, Jahleel Billingsley is a tight end that was our kick returner for a majority of the season at one point. This dude is a freaky athlete and someone that can make plays in the down the field. Last week that Georgia played in the garbage time, Ali had 80 yards receiving. I think Billingsley can easily hit this over 15.5 receiving yards just because we're going to need other players to step up with Jameson Williams or with Mechie not being a part of this game. And it's someone that his prop is just, he can get 2 catches and hit this pretty easily.
I agree with you. I looked in the back end for Billingsley. He projects around 26 yards for us. And this is a really interesting prop because he's not even priced at his season average. You look at what he put on the field per game, he caught 18.3 receiving yards per game. So he's about 4 yards below that. Now you're removing Mechie from the picture. That should only increase Alabama's 12 personnel usage. And Billingsley functions as a pseudo receiver. He's not a guy that lines up as much in line. They will use him in the slot. They will use him out wide in creative formations. And the target volume is not great, but he's still averaging 2.4 on the year. Again, Mechie's vacating a 27% target share. That's 128 targets on the year. It's 1,142 yards. I think a lot of that's going to go to Ja'Cory Brooks and the other receivers. But I also think Alabama uses 12 personnel a little bit more, to your point.
Yeah, and also in the beginning of the year for Billingsley, which had some games count against him, he was in the doghouse with Saban. This all season, it was just one of those things that he was active, but he wasn't playing. It was a strange year because he was a clear cut trying to be a breakout player for us this year, and then for whatever reason got in the doghouse with Saban. Mutu was playing well, and just they didn't really use him in that regard. But he's had some games where he's popped. He hasn't had too many games over that mark, but again, this was with Mechie in the offense. Without him, he leaves so many more targets up for the air. But let's get into your other prop, which we're sticking with Alabama. Ja'Cory Brooks over 38.5 receiving yards, which is one that I also really like as well.
Yeah, this one's getting close to being stale. It's already jumped 4 yards since I last saw it, or 2 or 4 yards. I can't remember what it was at, maybe 34, 36 yesterday. But obviously, Ja'Cory Brooks is just filling the role that John Mechie left behind. And I didn't think Alabama was going to do this. I thought they would put Slade Bolden in that role, but they kept Slade Bolden in his gadgety role that he'd been playing all season. He was still about 50% of the routes, whereas Ja'Cory Brooks jumped all the way up over 90%. He filled in for Mechie just 1 for 1. And again, we have a 1-game sample with him in this role. He had 5 targets against Cincinnati in a game where they didn't really need to throw. So I think if this plays to the spread, which again, Alabama is a 3-point dog, you should be seeing them throw a lot more. They were about 75% pass in the first game. That's a lot of targets that were vacated.
Oh, of course. And I mean, again, this is a lot different of a game. I really wouldn't look too much into that Michigan and Cincinnati game, just because these teams are talented on both sides of the ball, 5-star athletes everywhere, and have the ability to try to push each other. And that spread is 52.5. I think it could go over just because of the fact that Alabama's had some secondary lapses. We have new pieces in that side of the ball. And then for Georgia's side of things, even without Mechie, like I think Brian Robinson's going to have a different impact on the game. But it's going to be a fun national championship for a lot of fans watching this will be a good one. But if you haven't already and aren't subscribed to Awesemo and the platinum content that we got, we have an NFL Express package for just $3.95. Get access to our showdown tools. We got playoff season. This is 3 games that you're going to have prime time coverage for Saturday night, Sunday night, Monday night, as well as the Sunday early game, the Saturday early game. Come get on some Big Ben, Patrick Mahomes showdown slate action for just $3.95. Fantastic deal. But let's touch on some of these Georgia players. Matt, you got Zamir White under 1.5 receptions as well. I like this too.
He's just not a receiving back, and they have a full and healthy stable of backs right now. They were missing Kendall Milton for a lot of the season, and that doesn't necessarily affect Zamir White in the pass game. Kendall Milton's not a guy they're going to use as a receiver much, but he does take away snaps. And we know even in college offenses, sometimes you go on the field with a run play called, you need to check into a pass because of what the defense is giving you. Any snap that Zamir White doesn't play hurts his projection here. And then you just have the fact that he's playing behind James Cook and Kenny McIntosh in the pass catching game. Again, he's been targeted somewhat recently, but this is a pretty small sample. He doesn't have more than 2 targets in each of the last 4 games, and he has just 9 targets on the entire year, 72 receiving yards total. So this is a guy they clearly do not view as a pass catching back. And when they get into negative game script, if that does happen, I think you just see James Cook.
Oh yeah, James Cook is the player that I was going to get to next, where I've got him over the 25.5 receiving yard mark. He's done it each game that he's played against Alabama so far. And this past game against Michigan, he had over 100 yards. One of them came on a super big play. I just think he's one of those dynamic players where it's the get them the ball in space and hope some big plays happen. Alabama had some struggle on the secondary side where they were unable to tackle some of these Cincy receivers in those quick plays. I think Georgia will scheme up some edge type runs and some just pop passes to James Cook, getting him that over 25.5 receiving mark. Especially with just the limited ability of Stetson Bennett just throwing down the field. They're going to have to find creative ways to get the ball down the field. And this is just one of the players that I have. And then for the other Georgia player that I like, George Pickens over 1.5 receptions. I know how ugly this receiving room is. They definitely don't they definitely have a lot of players who get snaps. They have a lot of players who play. I just think Georgia with George Pickens is just the most talented player that they still have. The Michigan game, they really didn't need to throw the ball too much just because of the way it got out of hand early on. He managed 2 catches in that first game against Alabama and just as a clear mismatch went on the field, especially against this Alabama secondary.
Yeah, he's just hurt. So it's like, I just don't know how healthy he is. He hasn't played more than 23% of the snaps in any game he's been active this year. Some of them more competitive than others. So that's still a concern for me. I thought perhaps the extra month he would have gotten to rest after the SEC championship, heading into the college playoff semifinal, that they might use him a little more. And there's potential reasons why they didn't. He was coming off COVID. He contracted it pretty close to the game, so he missed a lot of practice time there. But ultimately, there's still a guy coming off. Oh, and I guess they killed Michigan so bad that maybe they took him off the field because what are you going to play your guy coming off a spring game ACL tear for at that point? But ultimately, the concerns are still there. Still not even playing a quarter of the snaps is a major concern for me. The line's really low, though. So, I mean, I have no issues with it. He projects slightly above it for our end. It's not my favorite prop, but if you're going to bet like 8 to 10 of these, I do favor the over. With James Cook, I think that's one that's fairly priced. I don't think it's a play towards the under by any means, but I just think that's exactly where his line should be.
Oh yeah, no, James Cook, like running backs with receiving props, like it's going to take that big play from him. Just a matter of if he gets it against Alabama. Like the first time he was able to, and the second time he was as well. But if he doesn't have that breakaway type of play, he's not going to get you 4 to 5 receptions. Like this is someone that's going to have to come off of just a volume type or efficiency where he just has that big play, that crazy 20-yard catch, breaks a tackle type of thing. And obviously with Bowers and just this receiving room as a whole is just very, very tricky because of how much they rotate. I do agree that Pickens hasn't been healthy. I just think that Michigan game got out of hand, and COVID has limited some NFL players from just the conditioning purpose. This is 10 days away from the last game, and one of those games that I think you're just going to have to get someone a mismatch, and George Pickens getting over 2 interceptions is easy for me.
Yeah, it's risky, but I think if Pickens can play to his talent, it makes sense. But also his usage doesn't make sense. So I have no idea. With Cook, I mean, the issue with me is he's not the clear pass catching back. He splits that workload almost 50-50 with Kenny McIntosh. It's a little bit skewed towards Cook, but not really that much. It's a lot closer than I think a lot of people really anticipate this being. And even in the competitive games, you look at the target difference between James Cook and Kenny McIntosh. Like Kenny McIntosh has more targets than James Cook over the last 4 games. Some of those more competitive than others. But against Alabama, 5 targets for Cook, 4 for McIntosh. That's an issue for me.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I agree that this bag, like Georgia's pass catching in this flex group is just one of those groups that they rotate a ton. They have a ton of different guys. Someone's going to have to be able to do it. I don't think it's going to be nobody. It's just a matter of where it gets done. But let's go on to one of our last picks for Alabama side of things with Brian Robinson over 67.5 rushing yards. I know that you have him in the 80s, so I'm assuming this is probably your favorite prop on the site today, outside of the Bryce Young one.
Jordan, it's really hard because you look at this prop, and I don't know what your initial reaction was, but before I did projections or cross-referenced, I thought this would be pretty efficient. And then I went and looked at Brian Robinson, saw him projecting in the 80s and tried to dig into this a little bit. The reason PrizePicks has him so low is matchup. And we have a sample, 1-game sample where Brian Robinson played Georgia this year. This is about what he turned in. He carried the ball 16 times. He averaged 3.5 yards per carry. For reference, on the season, he averages 5.1. So the matchup did hinder him. Now, there's a couple things I'll point to. First, he was banged up in the game. He's been banged up down the stretch this year, and he's a guy that definitely benefited from that month off. Second, they beat Georgia so badly that they only needed to give him 16 carries before they let Trey Sanders handle the rest of the work. Now, they also lost the possession to Stetson Bennett throwing a pick six. A lot of factors limited Brian Robinson's workload in the first game. Not to mention, Alabama went hyper pass heavy. They threw the ball about 75% of the time. On the season, they throw it 51.5% of the time. Maybe they take the same game approach, but it's really hard to project a 75% pass rate for a team that is only historically throwing the ball around 50% of the time, maybe a little bit more in this instance. And even if you do change that projection and efficiency, if Brian Robinson just plays to the workload he's seen all year, which is an average of 21.8 touches, he's a guy that just could very easily backdoor his way above this. With some of the lowest efficiency, he still projects in the 80s for us. So this comes down to, it's basically a math problem, and it doesn't add up.
Yeah. And I mean, during the season, like if you believe Alabama's going to win, I truly believe that Brian Robinson gets that 20 carry mark, because Saban in a national championship game isn't just going to be the coach that starts throwing the ball when, this type of situation. Every single game this year that Brian Robinson has had 20 carries, he's hit well over 100 yards. I know Georgia's a little bit different of a defense, but if we are going to win this game, which Vegas doesn't project, but a lot of people can feel their way around it, I think Brian Robinson easily hits over the 67-yard mark, just because of the fact that we are the type of team, and Nick Saban is the type of coach that he's going to end this clock. He's not going to put the ball in Bryce Young's hands and have him continue to throw when having any sort of lead in that fourth quarter or during the game. That's where it gets dicey. I think for me, the way I feel about Brian Robinson's prop is, if you truly believe that Georgia's going to win this game, the under makes sense. But
we have a spread for a reason. Like I've talked with a lot of people about this, and people have asked me, they're like, well, what if Georgia gets up in this game by 3 scores and then Brian Robinson's playing from behind? And you're talking about an outcome in that situation that's like 1 standard deviation off of what Vegas is projecting. The most accurate marker we have for games is the Vegas spread and total. If we're going to talk about 1 standard deviation outcomes, you also have to talk about 1 standard deviation outcomes in the other direction. What if Alabama's up by 3 scores and Brian Robinson carries the ball 27 times, 30 times, which he's done plenty of times this year. And we've seen Alabama with a double-digit win over this team. So I don't think it's fair to bring the 1 standard deviation where Georgia's killing Alabama into play without considering the other side.
Oh, no, of course. I just think for this, putting into your player prop, like for PrizePicks, I think you should just weigh in the fact that, like, if you're someone who's going for Georgia, like, I think game script is very important for Brian Robinson. He's not, like, if this stays like a neutral game script, then yeah, just kind of pick your field. But if you think Georgia's going to get this win by like 10 points or something like that, I think it's easy to take the Brian Robinson under.
Yeah, he just doesn't project anywhere close to that for me.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, we also have
my projections are to the spread. Like, I didn't project the game with Georgia winning by 2 scores.
Oh, of course. No, I get of course your projections don't reflect what you're going off of, what Vegas is telling you. In a neutral script, he's going to hit most of the time he's going to hit that over 67-yard mark. And Bama doesn't really have these close games that often, but like that Texas A&M game where they lost, Brian Robinson 24 carries for 147. Like he's going to, even in a loss, as long as it's close, like neutral game script, he's going to get plenty of carries. And obviously Georgia's a little bit better of a run defense, but even if he's a little bit less efficient, he's still going to hit over that 67-yard mark.
Yeah, I think a lot of people could be overrating the Georgia run defense too. Like, they're phenomenal, don't get me wrong. Probably the best in the country. But who have they played? Like, they play an SEC East schedule, which is not anywhere near what like Alabama even plays in the West. Who's the best team this Georgia team faced before the SEC championship? Clemson? Auburn? Like, who is it? Here's the schedule they played. Clemson. We got a lot of information on Clemson to realize they're not very good. UAB, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, very good team. Auburn, middling team. Kentucky, Florida, Missouri, Tennessee, Charleston Southern, Georgia Tech. Where are the good teams on this record?
I would also say, where's the good quarterback? Because Bryce Young, like, again, we've talked about it, and I've talked about it with you. Like, when you have a quarterback with the caliber of Bryce Young, it changes the whole dynamic on what your defense can do in college.
And I see some people in the chat. I'm not trying to discount anything Georgia's done. I think Georgia is a phenomenal team. And I bet Alabama +3, expecting this line to move. And right now it's at 2.5. And I wouldn't bet Alabama again right now. So I do view Georgia as a very strong team in the situation. I'm just trying to bring into consideration certain ranges of outcomes and potentially another reason why Brian Robinson could hit the over. So I don't want to slight Georgia's run defense by any means. It's a phenomenal unit. We know Jordan Davis and the kind of athletes this team has. I'm just trying to raise, like, points in favor of the Brian Robinson over.
Oh, no, of course. And I mean, with this game, like, I'm not, as an Alabama fan, Georgia is one of the best teams in the country. They're definitely top 10, or top 5, top 2, maybe even the best team in the country. They haven't played many offenses like this. There's not many offenses built like this.
Alabama they haven't played any, I don't think.
I mean, they just played us. Like, Michigan isn't, like, Cade McNamara can't throw the ball. You can discredit that game just because of the fact that they're not really worried about him throwing the ball downfield. And it's just much different when Alabama plays Georgia, and some of these SEC teams actually have that type of quarterback. So yes, I am taking Brian Robinson over the 67.5 rushing yard mark, but that's also because a lot of people have said, like, Georgia's going to win by 10 to me, like friends and different things. It's Vegas sees this as a really close game, and I just expect it to go that way.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I mean, like, you can look at implied team totals here. Georgia's implied for 28 points. Alabama's implied for 25. So
yeah. It's very, very, very close. And Josh Gillum in the chat, dude, Bama's defense isn't exactly the most stellar defense in the country. Don't worry, me and Matt are not looking at Bama's defense and saying that they're very good. Yes, they have given up 40 to Texas A&M and 45 to Auburn or Arkansas, but that doesn't really matter for this type of game, because we're talking about Georgia's defense and how many high caliber opponents they have faced, which they really haven't so far this season. The only team that we can really match up with is their first performance against Alabama, where they gave up 400 yards in the first half.
Yeah. And I mean, like, Georgia moved the ball really well in that game too. Stetson had, outside of the turnovers, and those are largely what ended up costing Georgia the game in a lot of ways. Like, Stetson's pick 6 was just backbreaking to the team at that point, because it was a 1-score game when that happened, and it derailed them. But the first half was extremely close coming out of the break. And a couple really costly plays were very impactful to the end outcome in that game. Like, if you look at total yardage, Georgia's not far behind Alabama in that game.
No, that game could have gone either way if they don't.
Like, if it's Bryce Young that makes that mistake, then Georgia probably wins.
Oh, yeah. And of course, I completely agree to that fact. But as we close up the show, Matt, who do you think wins this game outright? Not from a betting perspective. Who do you have winning this one?
I'll side with Georgia. Again, I'm a Bama backer in this. I took this really early on, expecting the line to move. It's moved a half point. Not quite the line value I thought I was going to close with, but just if you ask me straight up to pick a winner, it's going to be Georgia.
That's fair. I mean, I'm a Bama fan. I'm going for the Tide tonight. But again, if you have been here all year, appreciate you guys. Appreciate anybody who subscribed to the channel. Give us some likes. I know we got 134 of you watching, only 29 likes in the show. Love to see that number close out to 50. If you're new to PrizePicks, it's on your Apple Store, Google Store. You can download it. Use code Awesemo. We'll match up to $100 on your first deposit. You'll get a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And right now, they still have that bet up till 7:30 tonight with Bryce Young's over-under being 0.5. Take some of our picks. I wouldn't recommend going for that 5x where you can 10 or 5 pick where you can 10x on your money. I would stay to some of them, do a 3 power play, something of that sort, just because we are much better to take value from a bigger slate. This is a smaller one. There's a lot of props out there. But again, appreciate you guys coming on. We got a live before lock with Matt and Ben later tonight, going over some of the DFS betting and everything of all that sorts. Matt, I appreciate doing the show with you all year, man. It's been a blast. Hope you win your bets tonight. I hope Alabama covers for you very nicely.
Yeah, I hope they get the win for your sake. You have a little more rooting interest in this game than me, but it's been a pleasure, Jordan. Hopefully we can do some more shows this offseason and hopefully link up on an NFL playoff show or something like that.
Oh no, yeah, that would be fun. Me, you and Matt just had that fun old Saturday contest. I did say if there's any team to play their starters too long, it was the Cowboys. They ended up doing it, and hopefully someone out there took the advice and won some money. I played Dak, did not play Cedric Wilson, which was the death to me in my lineup in that one.
Yeah, I swapped to Malik Turner last second. Killed me as well.
Anyways, guys, thank you. Appreciate you. Have a good one.